Hello, Mayor Martin. I have the video streaming live now, so you can start anytime that everyone is ready.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm just waiting for Councillor Baxter to turn on his camera and Councillor Kobayashi. And there's Councillor Kobayashi, perfect. So we'll just wait for Councillor Baxter to turn on his camera. I did see him. Councillor Baxter, are you there?
Councillor Baxter does not look like he's in the meeting yet.
Oh, he was on, but okay. Well, he's still got a minute. I still have quorum, correct? Just with 4?
Yes, here he comes now.
Excellent and perfect timing. All right, I'd like to call to order the City of Colwood meeting for Monday, February 8th. This is a regular council meeting minute. I'm going to first of all do attendance. So if council, if you could please all unmute, and I will go through this. Councillor Baxter.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi.
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Day and Councillor Parkinson do send their regrets. They did let me know ahead of time that they were not able to attend this evening. Moving on to 2, release of in-camera resolutions. There was a special meeting with council in camera today, and there are 2 things that I just need to announce or release. The first being that Jen Hempting was appointed as our Director of Finance in accordance with Section 149 of the Community Charter, and that Marnie Bovin, Manager of Finance, was also appointed as our Deputy Director of Finance in accordance with Section 149 of the Community Charter. In addition to that, that the following members of the Heritage Commission have been appointed for a term to expire on December 31st, 2021. Those individuals are Jeffrey R. Bird, Josh Christensen, Peter DeVries, Sandra Hudson, Kate Humble, Ken Johnson, Richard Lindsay, and that Councillor Michael Baxter was appointed as the council representative, and Councillor Cynthia Day as the alternate council member to represent in service when Councillor Baxter is not able to attend. Moving on to 3, approval of the agenda. There is one change or one addition, council. I would like to add a 9.5, which will be a notice of motion, please. So with that change, may I look for an approval for the near-term, long-term, and regular council meeting agenda, please?
Just as a point of order, you have a 9.5 already in tonight's agenda.
Excuse me, hold on. Then you are correct. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. It will be 9.6. I misspoke. So it'll be a 9.6, which will be a notice of motion. And so the near-term, long-term, and regular council meeting has been moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Public participation. We did have some correspondence that exist that we've seen, and I do believe we have 2 people who have registered to speak this evening. I will look to our staff to introduce the first person.
Okay, so I've just asked one of them to unmute themselves. Oh, here we go. Go ahead, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Paul Skite. I live at 3416 Resolution Way in Colwood. And I'm speaking to the impact assessment request letter that I forwarded to Council on February the 5th. Thank you for the opportunity to address Council on my concerns about the lack of information on the impacts of the proposed rezoning application for 3460 and 3461 on Veterans Memorial Parkway. BC Alta Developments is proposing to increase the density from 21 detached homes to 4 rental apartment towers consisting of 240 units west of Veterans Memorial Parkway. In addition, on the east side, is proposing to increase the density from 30 detached homes to 2 residential towers consisting of 98 units, along with medical facilities, a local coffee and pastry shop, a steakhouse restaurant, and a classy neighborhood pub. The proposed height could reach as high as 9 stories when you add the rooftop patio and 2 levels of parking, all within 2.6 meters of adjacent residential homes. The developer has conducted studies to identify the technical requirements to construct the proposed development. However, in my review of the developer's reports and information available through Collwood staff, there is no comprehensive impact assessment of the effects of this development on the community and Havenwood Park, namely the impact of the development footprint of 6 apartment towers 6 stories high, the impact of 338 rental units accommodating upwards of 600 to 800 residents, the impact of the many, many more vehicles moving in and out of the site onto Veterans Memorial, and the impact of a proposed commercial amenity in a primarily residential area. So what are the key impacts on the community? First and foremost, the visual impact on the adjacent subdivisions is overwhelming, especially given that there's no tree buffer because all the trees will be cleared to accommodate the large development footprint. Secondly, the apartment tower residents will be looking right down into the homes and the backyards of homeowners, which will certainly compromise their privacy and their security. Then there's traffic congestion onto Veterans Memorial of some 340 plus cars entering and exiting from the site from 2 separate access points, one on the east and one on the west side of Veterans, in addition to the fact that there's a pedestrian crosswalk less than 30 meters from them. And then there's the question of overflow parking in the neighborhood streets and on Veterans Memorial, which is going to create safety and security issues for this quiet residential area. And then there's the noise and the lights from the 338 units of housing in this primarily residential area. But equally important is the impact of the commercial services. How will it impact the parking, the traffic, and the noise on the community versus such amenities being more appropriately located in designated development zones like Allendale, Royal Bay, and Latoria South? It's interesting to note that there's already a grocery store, a dental office, and a pharmacy less than a half a kilometer away at Latoria Walk. And what about the impacts on Havenwood Park? With public parking and access to the park right next door to the development, what will be the impact on the park entrance and the limited parking that's available now for the public along the Veterans Memorial? Will overflow parking create further congestion and safety issues for drivers and pedestrians using the crosswalk? What will the loss of the natural buffer on the boundary do in terms of the park setting and the ecosystem, and its potential compromising the conservation covenant that's registered against the park now? What about the increased use that will be bringing increased issues like fire, littering, and vandalism, which will certainly is going to challenge the policing issues in this park? What will be the impact of the development on the park features, the sensitive habitats, and the modest trail system that's currently in place in the park? There's certainly going to be implications for capital and operating requirements. And finally, how about the size and the scale and the height and the proximity of the development? How it will impact the sunlight, the shade, and the sheer wind shearing on the forest edge. In closing, I believe that it's important to have a comprehensive community impact assessment. It's so essential. This will allow Council to be well informed of the real impacts of this application on the community and Havenwood Park. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to our next caller, staff.
Hello, can you please state your name and address for the record?
Hi.
Sure, it's Kim Jordis. Hi, it's Kim Jordison at 3429 Hopwood Place. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, thank you for the opportunity to bring forward my concerns. As I stated at the last council meeting, I am opposed to the rezoning proposal at 3460-3461 Veterans Memorial Parkway. We are all aware that this is just a proposal. However, something doesn't seem quite right. My concern is straightforward. I understand that the city planning staff worked with the developer to craft this rezoning proposal. However, it is so immense in scale and so out of place for this area that I don't at all understand the reasoning behind city staff supporting it. I have to wonder if the planning staff had tunnel vision when reviewing this, where they only saw the 6 apartment buildings and potential tax revenue, but didn't look left or right to see the potential, to see that this proposal is jammed right between a woodland park and a low density residential area. I want council to know that although you say this is not a done deal, 2 of my neighbors have already put their homes for sale, with 1 already sold. And that tells me that residents have little trust in their elected officials to do the right thing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm just confirming with staff that there are no other callers.
There are
Or
no
anyone
other
wishing to
callers,
speak?
Mayor Martin.
Okay, thank you. Then I will
Hi.
move on. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can I interrupt? I thought we were supposed to be talking about for Marianne Whitaker. We were on the list, were we not? I spoke to Amanda. And
Excuse me, you were at another item. So you are a delegation, so you do not fall under the public participation.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great to clarify that. Thank you, Marianne. Yes, you're speaking at 7.1, just so you know. Okay, so we are going to move on then to, it doesn't look like there's any other public participation, so I will move on to Mayor's message. I am going to repeat what I read last time for Mayor's message, and I know people have heard it, but the comments that were said tonight during public, I think it needs to be said again. In late December 2020, the city did receive a rezoning application asking council to consider rezoning for 3460 and 3461 Veterans Memorial Parkway, formerly part of 3476 Wishard Road, which is north of Havenwood Park. To date, the city has received a large response from the community regarding this application. The public's concerns are being received and will be summarized for council to consider when the application is being brought forward for review. A rezoning application typically takes 6 to 8 months or longer. At this time, we are still in month 1, where a notification sign has been posted on the subject property, and the applicant is currently carrying out their own public consultation as per the city's policies. Please use this opportunity to communicate to the developer about your concerns. As this application progresses to the consideration of committee of the whole, and with following council meetings, including a public hearing, there will be opportunities for a public input in the future as well. We encourage you to sign up for the agenda notifications through our city's websites so that you can stay informed in regards to when this lands with the either the committee of the whole or council. Saying that, I'm going to move on now to 6, which is the adoption and the receipt of minutes. I'm looking for a motion to excuse me, for the regular council meeting minutes of January 25th, I need a motion to adopt. That is moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Logan. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. And then the committee whole meeting minutes of December 7th, I need a motion to receive. Thank you. That is moved by Councillor Kobayashi. May I have a seconder, please? I will say seconded by Councillor Martin, or excuse me, Mayor Martin. Just to keep us moving along, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to delegations. This is 7.1. So we have Laurel Lee Johnson and Marianne Whitaker from Alphabet Zoo regarding the rezoning of 3322 Fulton Road. Staff, I don't know if this is staff involved, or am I going straight to the proponents?
No, so you would go straight to Marianne and Laura Lee.
All right. You guys, Lori Lee and Marianne, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the privilege to talk to you today. And yes, we are talking about the zoning of 3322 Fulton Road. We bought the property last August, and we're really eager to work with Colwood to meet and exceed all the safety requirements in order to zone it as a P6 designation. And our current lease expires in March. And we carefully chose the property on Fulton because we were so impressed by the acre of forest, the charm of the old house, and that it was a community in Colwood. We believe that it is important to have children be part of their communities. It helps them grow up to be helpful, healthy, productive citizens. We know that there are other spaces that have been pre-approved to be daycares, however, they don't have the same natural setting. And at Alphabet Zoo, we believe in inclusion. We have 3 children who have confirmed diagnosis with autism spectrum disorder. We also have 5 other children who have ADHD and other behavioral challenges. And we believe it's important for nature to be a part of how they progress and grow up. Research shows us that it has enormous implications on the health of children, and that it is believed that nature actually affects us on an almost cellular level. Studies suggest that ADHD can be improved with exposure to nature, as it helps children's cognitive functions and it decreases negative stresses and depressions. Children with autism also do better in nature because it helps them bridge gaps between communication, social skills, and sensory processing. All children need to be in nature. They do so much better there. We believe that as an inclusion daycare, it is vital for us to continue with the opportunities we provide to the families in our care. We chose the property on Fulton because it had enough space for a therapy room. And I can let you know as a mother of a special needs child that that is valuable. And we know that Colwood wants to be part of the solution, working towards inclusion for all families despite their abilities. And it would be tragic if there was some municipal bureaucracy that got in the way of our inclusive childcare philosophy. There is a petition circulating with over 480 names and signatures from families and individuals who believe in the quality of childcare that we provide at Alphabet Zoo, the impact that this will have on our community as a whole, and the families and staff involved. Several letters, I believe, have also been forwarded to the mayor and council regarding the importance of our facility, our commitment to inclusion, and our actions that go above and beyond. We also received a letter from the Honorable Mitzi Dean's office confirming the vital need for childcare because of the shortage in the West Shore, on the island, and in the province. There will be 28 families affected by this if we do not proceed, as well as 10 staff members that will be let go. Last week alone, I had over 6 people call me just to be put on a wait list. Most of these 28 families will not be able to find care during these trying times. And our current clientele consists of at least a half a dozen healthcare workers, nurses, respiratory technicians. We also have parents who work in the food service industry and military personnel. These people have all worked tirelessly to help keep us healthy, fed, and safe during this pandemic. And to add more stress to their plate in what has been one of the toughest years is just something we want to try to avoid. The biggest impact, however, will be on the children. We have built meaningful relationships with all the children in our care. We have siblings that have been on a wait list since before they were born. These children trust us. They feel safe with us. They bonded with us. Having to have them readjust to new surroundings and new caregivers is not in their best interest. And we know that in Colwood, you support the health of children. We are aware that the Panhandle lot is viewed as a negative process or negativity in this process. And we know that being on the sewer is preferred. We did not intend to cut down trees, but had to do so for safety. The house is 40 years old, was not wired correctly for the square footage, nor did it meet current safety standards. We very much want to work with Colwood and meet all the bylaws and guidelines set out without sacrificing any safety. We know that variances exist to allow Colwood to view the uniqueness of every situation. We look forward to becoming a strong part of the Colwood Chamber of Commerce, and we look forward to finding a solution to this problem. We need children that are part of the community, that are part of Colwood and part of this world. That is how we foster advocates for the planet, advocates for citizenship, how we create role models and strong, healthy individuals who will change and shape our future. We just need the space to do it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. So just so for everybody's knowledge, a staff report regarding the rezoning application of 3322 Fulton Road is tentatively scheduled for Committee of the Whole on March 1st. Excuse me, I will look to council just to ensure that there aren't any questions for the presenters. I'm just looking for hands. I do not see any hands. So thank you so much for presenting this evening. Moving on to correspondence requiring council direction. You can see that we do have a letter from the Greek Community Society making a request to raise the Greek flag and illuminate the exterior of the Municipal Hall in support of the 200th anniversary of Greek independence. You see there is a recommendation there just for it to be received, but oh, I do see a hand. Councillor Jansen, what do you wish to do?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation and that we receive only.
Okay, thank you. That looks like that's seconded by Councillor Logan. Is that correct, Councillor Logan? Great, thank you. Is there any discussion? Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Just a question to staff, maybe, or to past councillors here. Has this been something that we do? You know, is this a precedence that we do this? It just seems very odd. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah. So thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. I'll take a stab at it first. First of all, we've had two requests to look at lighting up city infrastructure on a solid color. We've had this request, and we also have had a request from the Girl Guides of Canada to do it on a specific day. I know our communications officer, Sandra Russell, has examined if there was a way that we could do that, but right now it doesn't look like we have the ability to do a single light color scheme. That doesn't preclude us doing that in the future. And if this council chose to do that, we could probably find it in the budget to look at doing something like that. But right now we don't have that ability. And for myself, at least for the last 10 years, I do not recall us being asked to raise a flag, other than the only other example that I can think of us raising a flag is for the Legion in regards to Remembrance Day and the Poppy Fund. So that would be, and I will look to Councillor Logan. Councillor Logan, do you recall any other?
No, Your Worship. In fact, Council struggled with this very subject for many years, hence the creation of this new policy.
Yeah. Anything else, Councillor Kobayashi? Okay. Councillor Baxter?
Councillor Logan made reference to the policy, but the policy does actually deal with putting flags of other sovereign nations up. So I'm not sure if Councillor Logan's making the argument that the policy doesn't allow this.
Your Worship, no, I wasn't making any such argument other than just to answer Councillor Kobayashi's question, whether we have done this before, and just to say that we have struggled with the very question, hence the policy.
Okay, so is either the mover or the seconder going to motivate as to why we should not allow this?
Thank
Uh,
you.
We're
well,
looking for a reason.
Thank
yeah,
you.
well, okay.
Motivate.
Well, hold on. Okay, let's be controlled with this meeting. So, Councillor Baxter, you're requesting? I'm just formally doing this. You're requesting that the mover explain why he would like to just receive it, or would you
Yes.
like to actually give your explanation of why you would like to raise the flag? Because it sounds like you are speaking in opposition.
I'd be happy to give my reason for that.
Sure. Why don't you? Well, the floor is yours presently.
I'm getting the impression, being relatively new here, I'm not sure of the history, but I'm getting the impression that this would be the first time if we allowed the raising of the Greek flag. And I can think of no finer occasion than the 200th anniversary of the independence of one of the oldest democracies on earth. In fact, some would argue the original democracy. Therefore, I think it would be a great place to start with the raising of the flag.
Okay, so sorry, I don't want to interrupt, Councillor Baxter. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, so allow me to explain to council just a struggle that I was having this week, and part of the reason why it was even brought to this table is staff have informed me. I get presented with proclamations almost on a weekly basis. You know, people want to celebrate, you know, Victoria Chamber Week or whatever, and they don't really mean anything other than the fact that you're sort of announcing and celebrating it. The struggle that we're having, though, is staff have now informed me that it's because of legal reasons, it's an either-or situation. We either have to do all of the proclamations whenever we're requested, or we shouldn't be doing any of them. And my concern is if there's a criminal element that looks for a proclamation that I don't feel comfortable with, but it's legal, really I can't theoretically say, no, I'm not going to sign that proclamation. So I have sort of suggested to staff that I would prefer not to be signing proclamations unless otherwise. And that's where this sort of arose from. And so it's a matter of us deciding as a council as well. And I would love that direction. If council believes that every proclamation that comes in, we should be endorsing, or we shouldn't be endorsing any of them. And that's just, unfortunately, we're in a situation from a legal standpoint.
Point of order, Your Worship.
Yep,
I thought we were discussing a flag, not a proclamation.
We are. Sorry, and I'm explaining. So the first thing that they explained, there was a request in it as well to do a proclamation, and I already said no to that. But I thought I can't just be saying no to everything. So I was giving background, Councillor Baxter, on why this is at this table. And the danger, and I was using that as the example to say, this is the precedent that we're going to set. So if we're going to start putting up other nations' flags, when do we say no? Because it's pretty hard to say no once we say yes once. That's all I'm saying. Okay. I'm not saying that we should be saying no. I'm just saying once we say yes, we're almost saying yes to everybody.
Well, if that's the case, that if we say yes to one, we have to say yes to all. I can well imagine there may be nations whose flag we do not wish to raise at times, and therefore, yes, I'd go along with the motion.
Okay, thank you. But I was just explaining it. Councillor Jansen, you were the mover. Did you want to add anything?
Yes. Well, no, it's kind of been said, but there's 195 countries in the world, and I'm sure they all have a meaningful date that they would love for us to hang their flag and make a proclamation. I think the business of this community outweighs the need for some, us plugging a certain date for a particular country. I think some recognition or acknowledgement can come through our communications department in recognition of special events or special days, and I don't think that involves or needs anything from council.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. So the motion is to receive this. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 9. 9.1, this is a request for a Heritage Commission to provide historical information for Royal Bay. There's a recommendation that options be developed for local historian interpretation programming at Royal Bay and Seaside Village. I will look to Mr. Earl. Mr. Earl, is there anyone to speak to this from a staff standpoint?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe Mr. Borhill is on the call this evening.
Great, thank you. Mr. Borhill?
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, this was a proposal made by a member of the community that approached the Heritage Commission with the idea that there be some interpretive material celebrating the heritage of Colwood in and around the Royal Bay and Royal Beach development sites. It was well received by the Commission, and a recommendation was therefore made to Council as per your agenda. And might I add that this is an item that could be incorporated within the Heritage Strategy Development project that is scheduled for this year. And I'm here for questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Council, is there any questions? If not, then I will look for a motion. I'm not seeing any questions. Can I get somebody to perhaps make a motion, or perhaps the recommended? Councillor Logan? Oh, excuse me, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, I make the motion as in the recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Logan, are you seconding that? Great, thank you. Is there any discussion? Just clear everybody's hands. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 9.2, this is the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative. Mr. Borhill, will you be speaking to this as well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our Recovery Program Coordinator, Rachel Buski, is on the call, and if Council would allow us to provide some additional information ahead of the item, that Rachel is available to provide that.
Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead, Rachel.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. At the committee meeting that we attended last time, you asked me to provide additional information on the communities who had engaged with the MNAI, the Municipal Assets Initiative, the Natural Assets Initiative. And the information that I found for you was that by the end of 2021, 50 communities across Canada will have engaged with this program. In BC, the communities who have engaged are Nanaimo, Courtenay, Gibsons, West Vancouver, Grand Forks and Sparwood, and there are a bunch of projects over in Ontario as well. This process is principally driven by some things that are coming up in legislation, the PSB 3150, which is driving councils to amortize their assets. Apparently the gas tax is also guiding people down this route to look at their natural resources as assets. And also this work is sort of driven by the infrastructure deficit nationally. There's not much money to build new resources, and there isn't much money to maintain the resources where you already have the hard infrastructure that's constructed. And these are the things that are driving this policy.
Okay, thank you. Then I will come back to this. This was a recommendation from the February 1st Committee of the Whole meeting. So Councillor Jansen.
I'll move the recommendation that came forward from committee.
Thank you. And it is seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 9.3. This is John Cassidy, our Fire Chief, regarding a UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Emergency Support Services. Chief, are you available to speak to this?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The short report before you is a request for a resolution of support in presenting a grant back to EMBC for supporting our emergency social services. The grant application is up to $25,000, and the proposed budget to cover that is materials to support ESS and fill out our storage trailer, or attempt to start filling out our storage trailer that we use in combination with View Royal down at West Shore Parks and Recreation. The proposed budget includes 100 cots, 100 sleeping bags, cold weather and safety apparel for the ESS group, no-touch temperature thermometers for COVID, plexiglass screens for the reception center if we need to set one up, and a portable Wi-Fi router to enable the electronic sign-in and use of laptop computers that the program has. So that in a nutshell is what is before you, and the request is a resolution of support in submitting for the grant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Logan?
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi, are you seconding that?
Yes, I am.
Great, thank you. Discussion? Sorry, I'll just clear hands. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Oh, no, excuse me, Councillor Kobayashi.
I just like to thank Chief Cassidy for another one of his great reports. Very self-explanatory. I wish they were all this nice and simple. Thanks a lot, Chief.
I will thank you through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. I will give credit where it's due to Marcy in corporate services. She has always been a great asset and resource for the city, and she did me a solid in helping me write that report. So thank you to Marcy.
She did your homework.
Pretty much, yes, and it was all last minute. So it's thank you to Marcy.
Yes, very much. Thank you, Chief. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Excellent, thank you. Moving on to 9.4, Jill Collingson, who is our senior planner, and this is in regards to the draft Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Ms. Collingson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as you know, the city's been working with consultants from Lanark since March of last year on the Parks and Rec Master Plan project. Tonight, we're excited to introduce you the draft Parks and Rec Master Plan. We're looking for your feedback and requesting direction to release the draft for external referrals and community comment. So following the review process, we'll then return back in front of you with a summary of edits resulting from the public input and an updated draft for your consideration of endorsement. So I'll be brief, but the Parks and Recreation Plan is a strategic policy document for our entire Parks and Recreation system. The intent is to offer overall direction and guidance for managing the resources, associated infrastructure, and investment for the next 10+ years. The plan offers a series of recommendations to consider and is a guiding document. The document itself is organized into Section A and Section B. Section A offers an introduction, context, visions, goals, and an inventory and analysis. Most of this information you have seen before in previous iterations of project phases. Section B is a series of recommendations and strategies for implementing ideas and priorities that had been generated through this process. The forthcoming presentation offered by Lanark's consultant, Jana Zielinski, will go over formats, types, various recommendations, and an overview of some of the ones we thought to highlight tonight. For usability, everything is similarly formatted, color-coded, and referenced with other coordinating recommendations. So with that, I will quickly hand it over here to Ms. Zielinski.
Good evening. I'm going to share my screen here. So if everyone could just let me know if they see a slide presentation up.
We do.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'd like to say thank you very much to Mr. Mayor and Council for having me here this evening. I am very pleased to be able to provide an overview of the draft Colwood Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And I am not the face that you have seen in the past presentations. My colleague Kate is away with a new family member, so I'm here to share information and respond to questions. So for the presentation today, I'm going to begin with a brief update on where we are in the process. I'll share a few comments about the purpose of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and how it's intended to be used. I'll touch very briefly on the updated vision and guiding principles. And a focus of this presentation will be to introduce the draft recommendations and strategic actions, including how they were created, how they're formatted in the plan, and to share a few select examples to provide a sense of some of the plan content. I don't have time to go over each recommendation, so we've tried to select a cross sample of key ones, and I'd be happy to answer questions on others. And then we'll close just touching base on a few final steps and the timeline to come. So where are we now? We are actually getting very close to our target of having a final Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So the process started off very broadly in phase 1 with big ideas, and information was gathered and continued through phase 2 and 3, where we explored a lot of options and built the recommendations that appear to have strong merit for Colwood's future into the draft master plan. So we're now at those final stages where we're checking in, refining, and finalizing. This linear version lays out the sequential steps in the process. So phase 3 of the process, where we are now, is really focused on developing and refining the master plan. So we're presenting a draft here today. Then the next step will be our third engagement, which is a chance to ask the public and stakeholders to review the draft and share their comments for consideration as the plan is finalized. So on to an overview of the draft master plan. A little bit about how this document is intended to be used when it's complete. So a Parks and Recreation Master Plan is a citywide strategic planning document. It doesn't undertake detailed planning for each park facility in the network. Rather, it provides recommendations for the system overall, intended to assist the city in prioritizing realistic investments over time. It's a similar level of document to your Transportation Master Plan, looking at parks and recreation within the city as a whole. So the final plan is intended to be a tool for city staff and decision makers, partners, stakeholders, and the community to make thoughtful and strategic decisions about the projects and policies to pursue over coming years, and provides a basis for evaluating new opportunities that come forward. It is intended that staff will review and recommend strategic actions from the plan to be considered on annual strategic planning, and will continue to monitor and adjust its implementation in order to respond to emerging trends in the community. This planning process has provided an opportunity to engage with the community and stakeholders, specifically on the topics of parks and recreation, and to create a plan that's responsive to community needs and interests, as well as technical analyses that really identify where we are today and what might be needed to support Colwood's anticipated future. The plan itself is a compilation of findings and analyses from this process, along with the vision and guiding principles, recommendations for strategic actions, and an implementation summary that provides a suggested timeline for considering strategic actions. So our hope is that this plan is going to become a very powerful tool for the city to use when making decisions about its future parks and recreation network. So the vision statement describes the long-term future for Colwood and has had minor updates to reflect public feedback. It builds on existing strengths and community values while simultaneously setting aspirations for the future. And really always the intent with the vision is to provide a reminder about the spirit and intent for parks and recreation in Colwood and help guide decisions about future changes or developments. So the current statement reads, residents enjoy a city that is green by nature and the privilege of a connected network of parks and trails within easy walking distance of home. Colwood's parks, recreation, and natural systems are unique to this place and integral to the community's identity and exceptional quality of life. The treasured public waterfront is iconic and balances resilience to climate change and sea level rise, respect for the environment, and a vibrant destination for activity and cultural events in the region. The diverse amenities and thoughtful distribution of Colwood's parks and recreation empower all ages and abilities to live a healthy lifestyle and provide a legacy for generations to come. The vision is supported by 6 guiding principles that have been previously introduced. These principles provide more guidance and act as a checklist for strategic actions and improvements. So if something comes forward that really meets these guiding principles, then we can have confidence that it's going to support the intent of the master plan. So to support achievement of the vision and principles, the draft plan outlines a series of recommendations and strategic actions. The recommendations are developed based on 4 key sources of input. We've got the technical analyses of the existing parks, recreation, and open space resources, including a quantitative assessment of what the city has today and how this compares to other communities, as well as how it might be affected by future growth. Review and input from background documents such as the official community plan, as well as trends, demographics, and development planning information. Input from stakeholders and community members gathered through the engagement process, and input received from City Council and staff throughout the planning process. There are 3 categories of recommendations within the draft plan. We first have capital recommendations that are really related to the physical enhancement of the parks and recreation system. So these are the changes and additions that could be made on the ground to enhance the network. Within these capital recommendations, we have two types. The first are community-wide projects, which include ideas for the overall network, and they could happen potentially at a variety of locations, so they're not geographically focused on a single site. The second are location-specific projects, which are recommended updates focused on a particular park or location. The policy recommendations include more operational actions related to policy, planning, management, and information for the overall system. And finally, the plan includes financial strategies that are potential options that could be considered for accessing funding for parks and recreation system development and improvement. So there are a range of funding strategies that are outlined, and it's anticipated that the city will select those that really best suit the needs and opportunities. So each recommendation in the plan is structured the same way to support ease of navigation. They all have a reference number, description, and rationale to explain the recommendation and why it's been developed, including the public input and the technical analyses that support it. The recommendations also include planning and design considerations, which are key elements that have been identified through this process and will be addressed as the recommendation is advanced. They also include images and diagrams to provide a visual summary. And the key part of the recommendations are the actions, which identify basically a series of potential steps to be taken in order to advance that recommendation. So these actions are organized into a summary chart, and each component, each chart includes a reference number and a short summary of the action, a suggested timeline for when the action might be considered, helping to prioritize and sequence the steps forward, identification of potential parties that may need to be involved in advancing the action, including city departments and in some cases, external partners, and a preliminary capital cost estimate intended to assist with budget planning and expressed as an approximate range. In Chapter 6 of the document, there's an implementation overview that provides a series of cross-reference summary tables that are organized by the timeline in order to provide a clear tool for annual planning. So for an overview of the recommendations, in total, we have 18 community-wide capital recommendations for consideration. And again, these are the recommendations that are really meant to be completed potentially at a number of different locations in the community. And these were primarily generated through priorities that people identified during public engagement and through technical and comparative analyses of potential gaps in the network. So these include recommendations ranging from identifying target locations for new community parks to desired amenities like washrooms or designated off-leash areas that people would like to see refined in the future of Colwood. In addition to the community-wide recommendations, there's also a series of 7 recommendations specific to key parks within Colwood. And these typically encompass ideas to upgrade or enhance a specific park and include a range of candidate amenities and design considerations for its future, along with steps to advance potential changes. So in addition to the physical park improvements, the plan contains 12 policy recommendations for managing decisions and operations for the Parks and Recreation Network. And again, these recommendations are focused on elements like planning, partnerships, accessibility, stewardship, and other components. Essentially, they really focus on maximizing the benefits of parks and the Parks and Recreation Network. And the final set of 12 recommendations are related to potential funding strategies that the city could consider in delivering parks and recreation capital projects. So these recommendations are provided as options for consideration and are commonly used by other communities, and it's anticipated the city would use the tools that are best suited for their needs. These range from very common tools like property taxation and include considerations like the addition of a parks-focused DCCs and leveraging senior government funding. So the last thing I'll present today is a selection of a few recommendations from the Draftmaster Plan to provide a feel of how those recommendations work. We've selected a few highlights we'd like to share, but we're happy to answer questions on any of the others. So the first recommendation won't be a surprise to anyone. The public continue to strongly identify a desire to carry on with improvements to the Colwood waterfront, recognizing it as a key natural feature and recreational area. People readily understood that there's a lot of unique opportunities for Colwood's waterfront, given that lots of it is publicly accessible, unlike a lot of the other communities in the area. So the city is already working on this through the Colwood Waterfront Improvement Plan and with the support of the Waterfront Coastal Processes Committee. Key desires identified through this process will be explored and refined as these waterfront-focused processes continue. So some of the key priorities that people talked about in our process would be creating a continuous multi-use pathway so you can really experience Colwood's waterfront from Lagoon Beach through Royal Beach all the way out to Metchosin. soft shore restoration and planning for adaptation to sea level rise, celebration of Indigenous heritage, culture, as well as the environment, and ideas for upgrading and expanding amenities so people can actually imagine spending a whole day enjoying what Colwood's waterfront has to offer. Throughout the process, participants talked a lot about trails. So people in Colwood love walking and hiking, and there's really this strong desire for a connected, walkable community. So an opportunity that was flagged through this process was development of what we've called the Beach to Mountain Trail Network, building on existing trail segments in parks and creating a continuous loop from ocean to the mountains and back. This route would connect large parts of the community to the waterfront, and it also capitalizes on existing parks as well as areas where opportunities exist to secure new trail routes during future development. The trail loop is conceptually identified in 3 segments. The first is the community waterfront route, shown in blue, which would be a key focus of the waterfront improvement plan. The second is the Royal Beach to Mountain route, shown in purple, that would link up the mountain through the neighborhoods of Royal Beach, Royal Bay, and Latoria up to Havenwood Park. And a lot of this would be utilizing some existing trails, but then also adding in new linkages between them. And then the third segment, shown in red, is the trip back down the mountain from Havenwood Park through the Latoria neighborhood and Latoria Creek Park back to the ocean. So the outcome would really strengthen the connections between destinations in the community, including the strong links between natural features that Colwood really is well known for. In addition to key routes, participants spoke a lot about enhancing trails and active transportation throughout the community. So connecting to individual trails and making sure that we're developing a continuous and safe set of routes that facilitate walking and cycling. So the plan maps out key desire routes that were articulated by the community as linkages to work towards through future planning and development. The next step will be an active transportation network plan, and that work is already underway to really map out the existing components of the active transportation work. So that active transportation plan will incorporate findings from this plan as well as from the OCP. It'll also outline standards and provide a detailed implementation plan for adding key connections to the network. An important opportunity for Colwood will be continuing to add new strategic connections alongside new development and work towards this concept of a highly linked, highly accessible network that really makes it easy for all ages and abilities to get around the community. So C17 is a little bit different. I'm jumping ahead here, and this is really focused on creating a clear, consistent style for communicating about the Parks and Recreation Network. And so a priority that we heard from the community related to signage was improving mapping and wayfinding to really help people navigate all that the community has to offer. So Colwood already has a great groundwork in place with their existing park identity signs, and there's an opportunity here to build on this and incorporate new elements alongside future park upgrades such as enhanced wayfinding maps, consistent regulatory information, trail rating and accessibility information, and interpretive elements, and ensuring that new consistent signage accompanies each upgrade to the Parks and Recreation system. So I'm going to share a couple of examples from the policy section of the draft plan. P4 is focused on nurturing and, where possible, expanding the benefits of partnerships within the community. So as a smaller community within a populous region, the importance of partnerships in delivering a robust and efficient parks and recreation system cannot be understated for Colwood. While the municipality plays a key role in delivery of parks and recreation services, Colwood's unique location on the West Shore means it's fundamental to really work closely with local Indigenous groups, neighboring communities, the region, West Shore Parks and Rec, key landholders, and stakeholder user groups. Parks and recreation costs are one of the more significant costs that a community manages, and effective partnerships can share costs and efforts to the benefit of all. Partnerships can be incredibly complex to navigate, and so maintaining and managing those lists, understanding the city's partnerships and obligations, and really working to identify new initiatives will really benefit all of the residents of Colwood as well as people in surrounding communities. Recommendation P5 is focused on creating a more accessible parks and recreation system for all ages and abilities. So universal accessibility is an important goal in the OCP and for the community overall. So this means planning all new facilities and amenities to maximize universal accessibility, and really working to retrofit existing components of the network is going to lead to a network that's really meant for everyone. So this plan includes recommendations for actions like accessibility audits and assessments, steps to updating information and resources to communicate more about universal accessibility, and setting aside budget for incremental accessibility projects within the existing system. The funding strategy example that we're showing is S3, which is establishment of parks development cost charges. So while Colwood currently uses DCCs for utilities and infrastructure, it doesn't actually yet have a DCC that supports collection of development-related funds for parks. With community growth anticipated in the coming years, the city will need to be prepared to create new parklands that support the needs of a growing population. So Parks DCC bylaw, based on the projects identified in the PRMP, will allow the city to fairly collect and apply funds to new projects that provide the amenities from a growing population. So the key points for next steps and the final phases of the process include circulation of the draft plan for review by stakeholders and organizations and the broader community. So this will be an important opportunity for us to collect feedback, questions, and concerns to be incorporated as the plan is finalized. Finalization of the plan with council is targeted for spring 2021. And from there, it's forward to implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. I will, council, before I look for a motion or anything, I will go to questions. Staff, can we just drop the screen, please, so we can see each other?
I believe that one is in my responsibility, so I will do that.
Okay, well, thank you. I have Councillor Baxter, then Kobayashi. Councillor Baxter. Oh, Councillor Baxter, you're muted.
Okay, good. I get to start that sentence again. I've seen a lot of Parks Master Plans in the last 40 years, and I think this one's the best. I'm really impressed. And I have some questions and maybe some small changes needed, but overall I think it's excellent. So the first one is page 147. I guess, yeah, that's page 147 of the document. Just that it refers to increased user fees to improve recreation facilities. And it may be my ignorance, but I wasn't aware that Colwood collected any recreation fees. Am I right on that? Does anybody know?
For your worship, I can respond to that. We currently do not levy any user fees for any of our parks, for usage of our parks. It is something that is a strategic recommendation to look into.
So I just think saying increased might mislead people into thinking that we are considering or might consider increasing user fees in Wishard Parks and Rec in order to improve their facilities, when in fact those are nothing to do with this. So would it be possible to just change that to introduce user fees just to avoid any misunderstandings?
So Councillor Baxter, I'm going to let you continue. This is a question to staff. Are we just gathering input right now? Like clearly this is just a draft, and so there'll be changes made. So this is just Councillor Baxter, for example, recommending that those changes could exist within the report. So we don't need motions, we don't need anything like that. I am correct?
You are correct.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Baxter, just so you know, they'll take that into consideration. So table still yours. Still you.
Yeah, okay, I'll go through them as fast as I can. There's about 6. On page 129, it says, in most cases, environmentally sensitive areas should not be accepted as part of development-related dedications, even though these areas are important to be protected. So that raises the question, how would we protect those areas
through the
if we don't take them as dedications?
Through the chair, I can try to respond to that. So there are other alternatives for securing environmentally sensitive areas or protecting them through things like covenants or other orders that basically protect those lands, but as private property. And one of the reasons that the plan doesn't necessarily recommend taking those ESA areas as parkland is that it really ties our hands of other potential park dedications. And so it's not understating that those lands shouldn't be protected. It's just that they may not be protected as park, but an alternate use.
Well, in my experience as an approving officer, and everybody's experience is different, trying to protect them as private property was difficult unless you're dealing with a a significant body owning the private property. If it's just a homeowner, then who knows what might happen when nobody's looking. That's just a warning. Where did I get me? Okay. I'd just like to say a word for on page 31 under protecting and enhancing our environment for a specific mention of protecting wetlands. They don't get a mention, but I think they're extremely important. And on page 64, we refer to ourselves as part of the Western communities, and I haven't heard that used in years. And I think we self-identify as West Shore, and I don't think there's any higher power that has given us the name Western communities. So I, for one, would be grateful if we would either delete the Western communities or turn those two around. One or the other.
I'm sure. I think we can get them to put West Shore. I think I can twist their arm, Michael.
Okay, good. And I'm sure I had one more, which I have lost, so I will end. Thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to come back if you find it, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, through the chair. Janet, you know, unlike Councillor Baxter, this is my very first parks plan I've ever got to read, and I actually enjoyed it. You know, you actually took a very complicated project here, and the way you analyzed the data and sorted the data, it was really logical to me. You know, you can cut it different ways, but it was done very well. I thought it was easy for me to understand. I just have a couple of comments, or one question and one comment. So my first question is, when you're doing your analysis of people per hectare of parkland, you know, you did all that analysis, and one number that stays fixed, that the population grows, but yet the parkland stays frozen for the next 20 or 30 years when you're doing your analysis. So I thought one of the logical conclusions that was going to come out of it is that, okay, we're now going to be below the benchmark of where the other same-sized communities are. So I thought one of the things that was going to come out was that you're going to recommend us acquiring more land for parks, and yet I didn't see that. So that's out of the question, I take it, or, you know, it's a question I have. That's number one. Go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, through the chair, I can respond to that one. And it does, and I think maybe that's something that we could work on clarifying in here. So the plan does actually recommend acquiring new parkland and to work towards targets basically of maintaining our target of, you know, for example, right now the community has 5.3 hectares per 1,000 residents, and it sets a target to say in 2038, we still want to have 5.5 hectares per resident, or that's what we're going to aim for. And in order to do that, that means that we have to acquire parkland. And so a lot of the recommendations around, say, the community parkland acquisition, so C4, is aimed to try to increase those targets closer to where we want to be.
And did you have an idea where that parkland was?
In terms of geographical locations?
Yes.
The C4 does recommend general neighborhood locations to say if we were going to target parkland, it should be this in this area, and it gives approximate recommended sizes, so 5 hectares or 4 hectares.
Okay.
We don't have the exact lots set down because those aren't quite figured out yet.
Okay, fair enough. And so my last is more of a comment. If, you know, I guess I'm always worried about taxpayers, right? And the question they're going to ask. So what I see right now, and what you did was really clever in a way, at how you broke it out into, you know, short-term, medium-term, long-term, and the dollars, you know, if it was, you had $1 or $2 or 3 of those dollar signs, depending on the order of magnitude, and anything over $1 million, you sort of quoted a range. What would be really cool if you could do this, and I think you can, if you had this one matrix where you sort of summarize all those costs, like rough order magnitude costs. And then against that matrix, you have, line by line of where that money's going to come from. Like you came up with some ideas, DCCs, government funding, some of it has to be tax money, I would assume. So I would love to see that. That would be phenomenal if you could have that one summary. So you can actually, for the finance people, when they're doing a long-term strategic plan, we've got that financial data, roughly. It's a rough order of magnitude. I do understand that. But to summarize it like that, instead of trying to have to dig through all the stuff, like I was trying to add it up myself to figure out how much this is going to cost us, because I want to have an understanding, because taxpayer, that's the first question they're going to ask me, where's this money coming from and who's going to pay for it, how much, and yet you have to try to sort through your matrix right now to figure that all out. And it's rough order magnitude $12 to $15 million, I think, total, if you were to add up all those little single dollar signs and the $2, you know what I mean? So that's just a recommendation that I would have, because I think that would just make this report absolutely comprehensive. Just a point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Baxter. Looks like he's remembered his question, but I also have Councillor Logan. Councillor Baxter, is your question quick, or I'm going to go to Councillor Logan and I'll come back to you? You're unmuted. Please unmute, Councillor Baxter.
It's very quick.
Then I'll let you go ahead.
We have more than one reference to Esquimalt Lagoon in the document, and I was trained by our communications manager never to use the word Esquimalt in reference to a part of Colwood, but to call it, I believe, Colwood Waterfront. I don't care what it's called as long as it doesn't mention Esquimalt. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Logan?
How do you follow up on that one? That was pretty cool. Good pickup there, Michael. I do want to echo my colleagues' comments about the report. Very well done, and I just love the linkages to key recommendations, and it really sets us forward in terms of planning. And love the reference to trail connections and that sort of thing. Well done. Unless I missed it, I didn't notice any reference to Quarry Park, and that's going, of course, that's a future park, I recognize, but it will play a significant role within the new Royal Bay Southlands. So I wondered, did this focus primarily on existing parks and not necessarily on planned parks? And I guess was Quarry Park also left out because it's subject to its own parks master plan?
Through the chair, I'll start, and maybe I'll get Jill to answer as well. So it is right. What we've got in the plan and the mapping right now is existing parks that are known and confirmed. And so we haven't included anything that might be a little bit future or sensitive or anything like that. But maybe I'll ask Jill the current status of where that is.
Through your chair, as Jenna mentioned, it looked at what we have now. It did look at the terms of references that have been developed through the Royal Bay and Royal Beach recent development processes to ensure that general policy and recommendations align with what was to come. But as those things are not here yet, the future considerations have been generally referenced, but not the specific details surrounding what Quarry Park is. One of the recommendations is about new community parks in that area as well. So I believe that would capture most of that. And it looks like Mr. Earl has also just turned on his video.
Yeah, Mr. Earl has his hand. So Mr. Earl?
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. But I was going to make the same comment. Page 77 of the report, 125 of the agenda, section C4, new community parks. If you look at the image on that page, you'll see almost bang on where Quarry Park is going to be, a dot indicating a new park, an upland community park. And so that is intended to capture what you're suggesting, Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Earl.
Anything else, Councillor Logan?
No, Your Worship, although I'm happy to make the motion.
I've got questions first. I'll come back to you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I've got 5 questions, but they should be quick, or hopefully quick. And I'm going to refer, because you did such a great job in the report, I'm actually going to be referring to the categories. So the first is C2 and P4. So C2 is Beach to Mountain Trail Route Network, and P4 is partnerships. And I'm just wondering, has there been any conversations around our trail routes with Royal Roads and how we incorporate those two? And is Royal Roads an eager partner to be partnering on a trail access from mountain to beach?
Through the chair, and I probably will involve Jill in this again. Sorry, Jill. We have had, my understanding is that there has been conversations with Royal Roads, and they're aware of the recommendations that are proposed. And I think that there hasn't been any concerns or worries about what we're proposing in the plan.
So sorry, let me clarify my question for Ms. Collinson. So I guess my question more is, at the end of Heatherbell, there is a gate, I believe it's at Pacific Landing, that a lot of the public uses, Colwood public uses to walk on the trails into Royal Roads. I know at one point there had been a discussion that we were going to try and incorporate a trail that would continue from there, from Royal Roads and at that gate, and that we would somehow build a bike or trail system that would allow us to go through Meadow Park and then right to the ocean. And so what we were doing was working in conjunction with, I'm not concerned that they're going to be upset with our trail, more that we're working in a partnership and that we're actually building a connection between Royal Roads and our trails to our best advantage. Does anybody want to comment on that?
I can offer a comment, Mr. Mayor. So we have consulted with Royal Roads throughout this process, and the document, now that it's in draft form, will be referred to them for a formal comment. When it comes to recommendations for specific location of trails on their lands, that is not something that falls under this document. We have worked with them throughout drafting of this, and do recognize that the Royal Road lands do play a key piece of Colwood's recreation infrastructure, though not formally owned by the city of Colwood.
Yes, I realize we have no power when it comes to that. It would just be nice that we're working in cooperation and that we build a system that works for both of the organizations. Moving on to my next question is in regards to C6, play amenities. At some point, could we within this report or at some point find out about a life cycle and in regards to play amenities? And you know, I'm not sure if these things last for 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, and I would love to just sort of understand that. Is that built in, or would we ever see anything along that line?
Through the chair, I actually think that's a great idea, and I think that is definitely something we can build in. It varies a little bit depending on the type of play amenities. So for example, traditional play equipment versus nature play, but I think we can probably make some general recommendations of how quickly you would be considering renewal for those resources.
Excellent, thank you. And I do like it when you say it's an excellent question. It makes me feel really good. So you're welcome to come back anytime. Moving on to C7. C7 is more of a point that I just wanted to make to council. C7 is in regards to, sorry, I'm just trying to find it, youth amenities. And I really just want to really sort of reinforce that third bullet point, and that third bullet point being that there's an 82% of respondents are supportive or strongly supportive of a new skateboard park. It's something that I think it's far overdue in our community. We have the Wishard Skateboard Coalition who's been working diligently. This council has already supported that skateboard park happening at Wishard Park and Rec for close to $100,000. We're seeing construction costs escalate. When the project was first introduced 4 years ago, it was going to be about $700,000. I know the price has escalated to over $1 million now, and that's just due to construction costs. And so we need to get that done sooner than later. That's just a comment. So I don't actually have any questions in regards to that. My final two, C8, off-leash dog areas. I'm not hearing a lot of comment from the public in regards to a desire for that to change. and for us to be looking at anything different. Although when I read the document sort of suggests that we should be defining the off-leash areas. And I'm just hoping that you could comment on that.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I can comment on that. And I do think it's important to recognize off-leash dog areas, in my experience, are actually one of the most controversial components of parks and recreation planning. And the reason for that is simply because we have two key user groups. We've got people with dogs who want to enjoy the parks with them, and the people without dogs who want to enjoy the parks without dogs. And typically what we see happening is as the population grows, the number of people and families that have dogs and are using the parks, we see often conflicts that go alongside that. So it is something that I think is worth exploring, especially when you get into some of your more park management planning level projects. So looking specifically at Colwood Creek Park, I think that'll be a key question that the community is going to need to explore. And I think it'll be a challenging one. So I see a lot of communities are trying to make more strategic decisions simply because they're getting to a point where the issues are starting to get to be more than they have in the past. And based on trends I've seen, I would anticipate that Colwood probably won't escape that trend in time.
Thank you. And then my final comment or question, actually it's a question, is in regards to C13, which is adult fitness stations. I have been in other communities and I have seen some amazing adult fitness stations, but I've never seen them used. So do these things actually get used? And like, is there research that actually demonstrates like that they're not just furniture?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That's a great question. I will admit I have mixed feelings about them myself. So we've definitely seen a lot of demand out there, and then you go back to see them not being particularly well used, or often when they're beside playgrounds, the kids love them. That said, I think we are starting to see a trend, especially with COVID-19, that people try to embrace being outdoors and being outside exercising. So there has been this interesting increased demand over the last year that we haven't seen in the past. Whether that'll stay that way going forward, I'm not sure. I think it takes a very particular type of person to choose to recreate or do exercise outdoors in public. So I've seen my feeling on it is it's fairly mixed.
Okay, thank you. That is all the questions I have for this evening, but I do have a hand up. So Councillor Jansen.
Yeah, thank you. I was just envisioning your worship in some tights running around some fitness stations there, and I thought it might be a nice addition to our community. Now, having said all that, I love the discussion. There's not much that haven't been said already. I do appreciate the C categories there and some specificity that I was hoping to see for individual parks and what we should be considering. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the implementation strategy providing us with a little bit of guidance on where we should be getting to in the first 2 to 5 years and beyond. So I do appreciate that. I wondered, one question I had was under S, I guess it's S5, I was looking at parks decommissioning. Obviously, there are some underutilized areas or green spaces or green belts. And I do think there's a strategy in there somewhere to leverage ones that are lightly used, perhaps putting them up for sale in favor of land acquisition in another part of the community. Did we look into recommending certain green spaces or parks that we could look to moving in that direction, or is that beyond the scope, or is that too controversial?
Through the chair, I'll do my first attempt to answer, then Jill, maybe you can add a little bit more detail if it's possible. Right now, we don't have the specific recommendations, and you are correct in that, Councillor Jansen, that it is quite controversial when you decide to dispose of a land. So there is a pretty significant process to go through to analyze, understand, and then go through a public process before disposition can occur. So I think it is something that we often try to treat quite sensitively and thoughtfully. And what we won't want to do is recommend a bunch of disposition opportunities that haven't been fully fleshed out.
Great. I see Councillor, I believe it's Councillor Baxter has another question. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in on that last question that sometime in the last 15 years, can't remember exactly when it was, There was a park, an ordinary looking piece of flat ground that was put up for consideration of disposition, and the council of the day quickly withdrew when it saw the opposition. Gordy's nodding his head. He must have been there. It's within the last 15 years.
Thank you. I will look to Councillor Logan for a motion. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendation as long as it doesn't include you running around in spandex.
Well, that means I'm going to have to vote against it. Councillor Kobayashi has seconded it. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you very much for the presentation this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Moving on to 9.5. This is Jen Hempting, Director of Finance. I know Ms. Hempting, I did see her at one, yes, she is online. So I will perhaps have her just introduce the process. And then Ms. Hempting as well, I'm sorry I'm going to take you off your presentation probably, just to answer a quick question for me before you do yours. There was an additional request from Royal Bay Secondary in regards to a garden. Did that ever get applied, or will that be introduced to council at some point? I didn't see it in the numbers. That was it was a late addition.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Your Worship. So perhaps I'll start there. There was one off cycle. We use the term off cycle for any grant and aid application that is not received by the application deadline of November 15th. So there was one application between then and now that was received, and that was included as Appendix 3 to the report before you tonight. And that application was a request from Royal Bay Secondary School for $5,000 to provide funding towards the construction of an outdoor tool shed to be used by the secondary school. And so the staff recommendation before you does note for council tonight to consider whether or not to award grant and aid funding to Royal Bay Secondary School. And so to answer your question, no, that application was not considered as part of the adjudication process that council has undertaken to put forth the first portion of the resolution that speaks to awarding $40,100. And I'll just take a quick moment. So the report before you tonight summarizes the results of the council, the staff adjudicated process. So similar to the process that council undertook last year, this year, all of the grant and aid applications were provided to council late last fall, along with the annual budget allocation, which this year we have just over $44,000 allocated for purposes of grant and aid funding. And we do recommend that a nominal portion of that be set aside in order to consider off-cycle applications. And so we did receive feedback from all members of council, and that has been compiled, and it was provided as Appendix 2 in the report before you tonight. And the staff recommended is simply any application that had the majority support of council, and it was the weighted average of the feedback that we had received. And the last point that I will highlight, during the 2020 grant and aid discussions, there was some discussion with council with respect to, there was a handful of organizations, approximately 5, that received standing or core grant funding. And so year after year, these organizations had become, through council resolution, a line item in the city's budget, and the city did not require an annual application. And there was the discussion last year that this could be seen as perpetual funding, and should the city consider moving away from such a grant. And so all of those organizations were notified of the potential for this move, and all of those organizations did provide a grant and aid application, which you have seen and reviewed. And so that is the last component of the staff recommendation that you see before you tonight, is whether or not council wishes to give consideration that only applications received on an annual basis would be considered for purposes of awarding grant and aid funding. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Worship. This is great. I think this is a far better way to handle this, what can sometimes be a cumbersome process. So I do appreciate this. I am going to move the staff recommendation, Your Worship, but I just had a question. Does this include then the total amount for Royal Bay School that they're asking for, or a portion of it, Jen?
Thank you for asking through the chair. No, it does not. So I would be asking that council indicate. And so if council is supportive of the staff recommendation of awarding $40,100 to those organizations listed, the budget remaining is $4,100. And so without making a change to the budget that's allocated for grant and aid purposes, council could award up to $4,100 to Royal Bay Secondary for
Thank
purposes of the request.
Okay, that's clear. So I'm going to move your recommendation, plus I'm going to suggest half of the amount that Royal Bay has asked for, which is a total of $2,500. And that leaves us a little bit in the kitty for something that comes forward mid-cycle, which I think is the intent there. And that would be my motion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I see Councillor Kobayashi's hand up, but I think that's for discussion. Councillor Kobayashi, were you comfortable with seconding that as well?
I'll second it so I can have a discussion.
Okay, perfect. Yep, absolutely. So I will. So you're seconding it. I'm going to clear hands. I'll just go back to Councillor Jansen first. You wish any other comments before I go back to Councillor Kobayashi? Councillor Kobayashi?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Yes, I have a couple of questions here, Jen. Well, first, actually, I think the motion should also have that about the annual recurring requirement to put applications in. I strongly feel that way right now. This leads me to my second comment, which was, I remember, and I didn't make a big deal out of it because I remember, I believe it was you, Your Worship, that had requested an explanation before we actually judged it. Was, what's the difference between the West Shore Arts or the Arts Council and the Wanaphuka Council? And I think there's another one that Colwood president that wants to start something, right? So, and that's still not clear in my head. I'm going into this and I thought, okay, so we submitted it all, but we never did get that explanation. So that was the big question I had in my head because, I'm starting to understand. I actually sat down with the Colwood Arts Council person and I understand what she wants to do. And she's not asking for much, by the way. And it's mainly volunteer time. We're not paying for someone's salary in it, right? And I know what the Wanaphuka Council is. So, I have no problems with them, but I wasn't too sure what the West Shore Council does and what it did for us last year. Like, we expended a lot of money and yet it was a COVID year and I don't recall anything happening here in Colwood that was sponsored by the West Shore Arts Council. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm mistaken, but I don't understand this. So, how can we justify using taxpayers' dollars here? So,
Councillor Kobayashi, I completely concur with what you're saying. I think probably the best way for us to move forward in this process would be that the majority of council did select the West Shore Arts Council. I believe it's the West Shore Arts Council you were talking about. But I would suggest that we ask them to come and do a presentation within the next month to explain exactly what they're doing on behalf of Colwood. I agree with you that I think we need that. But go ahead, Councillor Jansen or Councillor Kobayashi.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll accept that. You know, I'm not going to sit here and spend a lot more money for the amount of monies that we're dispersing here. But you know, it was just a valid point that you brought up, and I agree. And I never did get that satisfactory response. But I will agree to you know, not take this any further until we hear from them. Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
So,
thank you.
Just to add to my motion there, was to be specific, I do agree, and I do want to include that bit about the yearly applications. Jen, I think you had some language there, so I will.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Jansen. It is that. Sorry, if you're looking at the agenda, so page 5 of the agenda. It does have it at the end, which is, and further that only those applicants receiving an annual basis for purposes of awarding grants and aid funding. Good. So we can include that as part of the motion. Can I just clarify that statement, however, with staff? So just so that I understand this clearly, these applications that are received on an annual basis, does that mean that if somebody new wants to apply, they can or cannot?
Thank you, Your Worship. So for clarity, this has nothing to do with any new application coming forward. The intention of this piece of the staff recommendation is that only applications that are received annually, so each and every year, may be considered for purposes of the funding. Up until this year, we have had some grant and aid recipients that have not been required to apply annually.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Per past
Okay, got it.
council
Thank
resolutions.
you. It's clear to me now. I got it. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you, Ms. Hempting. Moving on to 9.6, which is a notice of motion. Councillor Baxter? Councillor Baxter, you need to unmute.
Okay, I wish to make a notice of motion that at the next regular meeting of council, I intend to propose a resolution that would allow staff to use short-term pilot projects in areas where residents are seeking calmer traffic without any project-specific approval from council.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. So there is nothing that council needs to do with that. That's just a notice of motion, and so that will be on the next council meeting. Moving on to 10, this is bylaws. 10.1, bylaw number 1134-05, traffic and highways. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, second by Councillor Logan. Discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 10.2, bylaw number 1848. This is the municipal ticket information amendment, Schedule 12. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Jansen. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 10.3, this is bylaw number 1850, main sewer LAS enlargement for 3371 Wishard Road. This is for adoption. Excuse me. Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Kobayashi. Any in opposition? Seeing none, that motion passes. Moving on to 10.4, this is bylaw number 1851, West Sewer LAS enlargement for 3371 Wishard Road. This is for adoption. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 10.5, this is bylaw number 1853. This is main sewer LAS enlargement 3353 Marianne Crescent for adoption. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, second by Councillor Baxter. Discussion? There is no discussion. Any in opposition? Nobody opposes. Moving on to 10.6. This is bylaw number 1854, West Sewer LAS enlargement for 3353 Marianne Crescent for adoption. Moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Looking for a motion to adjourn? Oh, who got in tonight? It's like watching the lottery, folks. Let's see. Oh, Councillor Logan still got his way in there. Congratulations, Councillor Logan. You are the winner of the adjournment. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Good night.